Hello, Tao. It's so nice to see you on screen.
Hi
How are
Liz, how are
you?
you doing? I'm good. A little under the weather, but it's that time of year, so
It is. I feel like we have a constant low grade sickness just this whole
yeah.
season.
Yeah, I've actually saw a doctor recently. I had to go and get pills and everything because it's just one thing after the other. So
Mhm.
my voice is a little off, and I might cough a bit.
Well, thank you for joining us when you're even under the weather. Um, Now, Tao has
Mhm.
about over five different series across progression fantasy, lit RPG, cozy fantasy. And did you just release a book today? Or was I
Uh,
reading that wrong?
Sort of. It's released on my started publishing my publishing company's site, Shopify site. So that's it's available for people to buy it directly there rather than buying it later on at all the other retailers. So I earn a little bit more money that way. And it's just a nice way for people who want to support me directly to get it.
That's great. Well, congratulations. What a
Thank
perfect
you.
timing. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and maybe how you got into IFA?
What?
What,
Huh.
if you remember.
Yeah, I have, I'm trying to remember how I got into the IFA. Might be, oh, was it Rachel? No.
It's
Maybe
likely.
you? Yeah, it was either Rachel or you or someone who suggested I join it. And so I, saw this group, poked around a little bit before I started talking. I still don't talk very much because I don't have time to go and, be on all the socials and all the groups all the time. Also, Facebook is really horrible at consistently showing you the stuff that you want. So, it's just like, oh, wait, I forgot that I was in this group, compared to all the other 11 other, groups that I'm in sometimes. So, but yeah, no, the IFA was fun. A little bit about myself, I guess. I am a ex-Malaysian, current Canadian. I live in Toronto, in Canada. I used to live in the White Horse, the Yukon. Uh, for those who don't know, that's right next to Alaska. And yeah, I've been in Canada for 20 plus years. For fun, I eat, I cook, I do martial arts when I'm not broken, um, which, as I get older, becomes more and more regular, that broken bit. And yeah, I write uh, a lot.
Now, I was going to ask you if you liked cooking because I've been reading your Hidden Dishes series and um, just the love of the details in the food descriptions is very evident to me. So I was pretty sure you must be into cooking, or I was going to ask where your kind of recipe inspiration comes from.
I have loved cooking, I've loved food since I was a kid. I'm Malaysian. And one of my jokes is that every you every Malaysian you'll encounter is pretty much a foodie. We have so much good food in the country because we Malaysia was colonized by the British, and then they imported a whole bunch of Chinese and Indians in. So there's basically about four major types of cuisine running around in the last 140, 150 years, I guess. So we were doing hybrid, fusion cuisine for since then. In fact, if you go backwards, there's a whole group of people from the trade ships, or the Nonya people who came from China who stayed in Malaysia. And so they have about 500-year mixed Malaysian fusion cuisine called Nonya food as well. So that's just so much good food that you end up talking about food all the time if you're in Malaysia. On top of that, you've got to I grew up eating well. because my mom was a great cook. My grandmother used to run a catering business as well, and she was an amazing cook, like ridiculously talented. She'd walk into the fridge, look at what she got, pull it out, and then you'd have something that was as good, if not better, than whatever, restaurants you were going into. With all of that going around and debate, and an aunt who loved to bake and whatnot, I just learned to love cooking really and food. And I'm cheap. Um, I often look at things and at restaurants and go, I don't want to pay that much. And then I'll go and cook it. And then sometimes I'll come
Yeah.
back and go, I'm paying that much. I'm not doing this. It's too much work. It's
Right,
too many
right.
ingredients, too much work. This is worth every single dollar. Um,
Sometimes you can make it at home for better and cheaper.
yeah, sometimes, but sometimes it's just not
Sometimes.
worth it.
Depends on what it is.
It is. But yeah, with the Hidden Dishes series, I only put out one of the novellas. It's a novella series. Every year because I actually do a bunch of cooking in between, and it forces me to explore new recipes. And so all the recipes that I talk about and write about is stuff that I've done in here. And sometimes I'll do like 5 or 6 iterations of the recipe, pulling from different sources until I'm happy with what it is. Then I take notes. And then it becomes, part of the book itself. And sometimes there's downloads of the recipe that people can get as well.
Okay, I was just gonna ask you if you had like if you were putting together like a recipe book to go along
The
with
first
this
book
series.
already has it. If you get the physical ones, the first book has them inside. Uh, I think the second book is a downloadable content. I think, and then the third one, not a lot of people have been downloading them, so I went, you know what? I'm just gonna keep this in the back end, and if anyone asks, I can always throw it at them. But otherwise, it takes a little bit of time to format it all, right?
Mm. Yeah, I can imagine. Now, you write in a lot of different genres. So, since cooking is definitely a passion of yours and has been for a while, was this series something you had been thinking of doing for a while, or how did you get into this cozy fantasy?
Oh, I love, as I said, I love food. And one of the things I've tried writing a food book multiple times. Like I have 2 different starts of a lit RPG food book that never got anywhere because I couldn't figure out how to create the necessary tension. And in a proper novel, you think about, oh, I need to have tension, I need to have something to drive people along and to make people read it further. And all I really wanted to do was write about food and make people hungry. That's my goal. The entire goal of Hidden Dishes is to make you read the book and go, I'm hungry, I need to eat something. If I do that to you, I'm happy. um and I couldn't figure out how to do that because I was trying to fit all of these other aspects into it. And then I read Registered Large Lattes and Miss Percy's, which has a plot. Unlike Registered Lattes has a bit of a plot. And then I realized, and I've been watching some of these other animes, like Restaurant from Another World, um, and a couple of other food animes, which I can't remember the names of at the moment. And it clicked to me that I don't have to put tension. I don't have to do that. I can just write it as a cozy. And the entire goal is just to make it about um the food. And
Mhm.
so there's a tiny little bit of plot inside the books, but it's not really the point. The point is the food. And I'm happy with that, you know. Um, yeah. Oh, the other problem I was having as well with writing it is I kept on trying to write. There's a little bit of a historian brain in me. And I was trying to write fantasy books, and then my brain would go, "That's tomatoes. That doesn't work. That's not the right time period." Or
Yeah.
I'm in a complete fantasy world, but there's potatoes and there's grapes and there's saffron. How do and then my brain spirals, and I'm trying to create this elaborate scenario. about why all of these spices work. And I just, that's why Hidden Dishes is a noble fantasy, because I don't have to explain.
Right. And you've got it based in Toronto. So you and you do touch on how he gets some of the ingredients, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, I do play around with some of that. Some of it is interesting to talk about when you know a little bit. I don't know a lot about gardening and, that entire agricultural section. So I'll touch on it when I know something, and that's about it.
Yeah, that's great. It is making me hungry, that series. That has like just, the right amount of like characterization and the thread of like what's going on with, the tension of the plot. So now that's your cozy, and you write in so many other subgenres. I'm curious about kind of what your writing schedule is, because you do Kickstarters, you've got a Patreon. How do you kind of keep all these series together?
Um, so that's two sides of it. That's the business side and then the craft side. The business side is the answer is very easy. I hadn't uh I this is a fantasy chat, so I'm going to use the term minions who help me out with it. They're well-paid minions and they're well cared, and I don't use the whip more than once a day. Um, but that's how I get a lot of stuff like Kickstarters and Patreons and artwork and all of that sorted out. Translations. I just can't. If I was up to me, there was no way I could keep up with all of this. But because I have been fortunate enough um, to be successful enough to have people who can help me, that they handle all of that, a lot of that side of it. I still oversee a lot of stuff, and some of the marketing things I have my fingers in because I have to. Um, but most of that is a lot of the back end stuff is handled by them. Um, the craft side of the equation, I call my brain a squirrel brain. Um, I actually work better when I have multiple projects running, because what will happen is I will write to a certain point and then my brain will go, you could push it and you'll get another 500 words in the next 3 hours on this project. Or you can put it down and you can work on this shiny, because we know what we want to do in this. And so I'll shift over to the other shiny object, and keep writing on that one and let my subconscious brain go figure out whatever it is that stopped me from moving onwards, in that particular series. Um, and so that's why I often have 2 to 3 different series running. I call them I kind of categorize them between heavy series, like heavy world building, multiple point of view, really intense, complex, emotional stuff. Um, and then my light series, like Hidden Dishes. Like I can write Hidden Dishes and my Xianxia, the Thousand Li series at the same time, no problem, because they are very light. Hidden Dishes is very light. I don't have, even though I have different characters, I'm not trying to draw upon heavy beats in there. I'm not trying to build a whole world and keep all of that inside my brain at the same time. So it's easier.
Hmm. Yeah, I find writing cozy is a nice palate cleanser for me as a writer and for reading it between other heavier things. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
it's nice to hear that I'm not the only one who kind of thrives better working on multiple things. Um, the last panel we just talked about the future of indie fantasy, and at the end there were some recommendations about the next couple of years and how to best thrive. And a couple of the suggestions were kind of saying try not to get burned out doing everything. So I see that you have developed a team to delegate. Was it hard for you to begin delegating?
Oh, yes and no. I laugh a bit. I come from a different background than a lot of people here who get into indie publishing because I owned a business where I I did own a business when I started writing. Um, and for a few years, actually, after I went full time and that business shut down, um, well, actually, a few years when I could have used someone, I didn't want to hire anyone again because I was burnt out, not from running a business, but from having staff. Um, because there's a responsibility when you have staff, when you have people who rely on you for, their bread and butter, right? If I'm taking someone and I'm giving them 20 hours or 40 hours and telling them, you know what, that's how much I'm gonna, you can do, and then I cut it out on them, right? After like 6 months or a year or whatever, that's a problem sometimes. And I didn't like that. I didn't want to be in that. I didn't want to be in that churn again. And so for a long time, I didn't. But the handing of the responsibility and figuring out all of that bit, that was easy. I was, as I said, I ran a business already. Knowing what I could handle out and how to hand it out was simple. I didn't have a problem with that. It was the weight of having staff that I didn't want to handle for a long time. And now I'm stuck with multiple people.
Well, it seems like you
But
must have a good team,
I,
with what I
I do.
see.
I'm really happy with them. They've done really well for me. There's some churn, right? As you're trying to find people, the right fit. But once you find the right fit, you hopefully can hold on to them well enough that they don't disappear on you. That was the other thing that drove me nuts in the old business, where you train someone up and then they disappear. You're like, damn it. I'm
Hmm.
glad for you. You're getting paid better, and your career is going on, but now I have to train someone else.
Hmm. Now, today there has been a good amount of talk about lit RPG and progression fantasy. Um, and now I hear your Thousand Lee series is a really good place to start for progression fantasy.
It's
Um, the cultivation genre.
in the cultivation genre, if you're looking for something that is more traditional, Xianxia cultivation, traditional Chinese progression, I would definitely recommend it. I wrote the first book in particular, though, and the first few books with the idea that I was going to be introducing it to a lot of readers who had no idea about, you know, cultivation systems, all of the back end cultural tropes and things like that. And so that's a lot of explanations that go into the book itself, hopefully in an organic way. And when I can't do it organically, I just throw a footnote in. So I also have running footnotes for a lot of both cultural aspects and things that might not make sense to someone. Because you don't have the cultural background to understand why certain things are happening. And so I'll throw a footnote and try to explain that within that context to some extent. It's tricky always because you're trying to balance, not being this kind of weird voice in people's head going, this is why, and then, at the other side of the equation, you're trying to tell a story, right? And keep people invested in it. So but I like to think that I done a decent job. Um, I've had a lot of good feedback on it.
Now, can you talk to us about the difference or the relationship between cultivation and progression fantasy?
Okay,
Um,
yeah.
it's kind of growing in the fantasy sphere.
So the way I look at progression fantasy is that it is a catch-all term, which covers things like potentially like RPG and Xianxia works, cultivation works as well. Almost all cultivation works probably will have progression fantasy aspects in it. Almost a lot of the RPGs will have the same. Progression fantasy, the way I describe it to anyone is if your main character's main problem-solving solution to a major problem is to get stronger, you're writing a progression fantasy. So if you look at Naruto, um, Sasuke runs away and has a big heartbreak and leaves. Naruto's solution to this problem of his best friend having emotional issues isn't to sit down and talk to him. It's to get stronger so he can beat up Sasuke to go and so that he can talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
That's a progression fantasy. The solution to every problem is to get stronger. Um, Cultivation kind of falls in that because the characters are always getting stronger. The threats they're facing, it's getting stronger. Specifically, a Thousand Lee, they're getting stronger with a goal of becoming an immortal. A lot of the Xianxia, traditional Xianxia work to get stronger. The reason why I say they're not complete overlaps is you can have a lit RPG story where the goal isn't to get stronger per se, right? You can have them as already super strong. And so then the lit RPG elements are just flavor in there. Same with a Sensia story. If you write a story about a character who's already an immortal, that's not progression fantasy because their solution isn't to get stronger anymore, but there are aspects of it in there still,
Mm-hmm.
at least in the world building.
Yeah.
Um, I think the series progression fantasy, I think we've grown up. A lot of people have grown up watching a lot of anime, and even a lot of the older series have elements of progression fantasy in it, right? King Arthur, you watch him start out from being a basic knight to, taking over Camelot to having all of his people around him. That's in some ways a progression element. Wheel of Time, you have Rand Altor going from, a peasant to becoming the Dragon Reborn with all of his crazy ass powers. That's a progression fantasy. It's just not the same way that it's being written now because not all your solutions are let's get stronger.
Right. So there's definitely the element of progression in a lot of like epic fantasy. So we've been kind of seeing that. But yeah, the do you feel like this genre has grown a lot more recently? Why do you
I think
think that?
it's exploded. Like
Yeah.
it's exploded in size. I mean, when I started writing it in 2017, we used to see, especially for lit RPG, we used to see like 4 or 5 books come out, maybe if we were lucky, in a month. Now we get 4 or 5 books coming out sometimes in a day, right?
Mhm.
You look at the start of the month and there'll be like 20 to 30 new books coming out within like a space of a week. And those are the big ones, not even counting the ones that we don't even know about, you don't even hear about. So the number of authors writing it has increased, the number of readers have been reading it has increased significantly. Um, People like Dungeon Crawler Carl, He Who Fights with Monsters, The Wandering Inn, they've all brought in new readers, right? Who are seeing these books almost for the first time and going, oh, I want to read this. Or some of them are old light novel readers, because a lot of the light novels are like Danmachi, Konosuba, Sword Art Online, they're all the RPGs. They just never really thought of themselves as that, right? They didn't have that term because that's
Mhm.
been coined in 2012. So people who are coming up and growing out of that and reading these lit RPGs are going, oh, I know what this is.
Mhm.
This is stuff I've read before and I like it. And I think the Western world, we've written the RPGs different from how light novels are written and how like the Russians have their own flavor, the Koreans have their own flavor, the Chinese with their Xianxia works, and just actual the RPGs have their own flavor. And I think that's also helped grow the market because And I think that's also a lot of different ways to enter it. You've got anime, uh,
Mm.
you've got TV shows like The King's Avatar is on Netflix right now. Untamed is it's sort of a sense, yeah, progression fantasy a little bit, not really. Um, but Once Upon a Time in Linjiang Mountain is a Xianxia work. You've got web comics, web novels, all the translations coming through, and then you've got actual books in there. And then you've got some of the movies like that have had that flavor, boss level, that Ryan Reynolds one that came out recently. God, I can't remember what it's called now. Nice Guy? I don't know. But
Fall
it's,
Guy, David Green says. Fall
hmm?
Guy?
Oh,
Fall
Fall
Guy,
Guy.
David says.
Is it Fall Guy?
Free Guy?
Free
Now
Guy.
we're not. Now
That's
we're
right.
not sure.
Free Guy.
Okay.
Yes. Free Guy. That's right. Yeah, Free Guy. That's literally a lit RPG, right? And then so you've got has so there's a lot of ways that people are learning about the genre and getting a taste of it, and then realizing that it's something that they like. Lit RPG in particular, not as much with Xianxia works, the cultivation works, though there are some, and certainly progression fantasy. There's a lot of little dopamine hits that are part and parcel of the writing itself, right? Every time a character levels up, every time they get a new piece of loot, that's a small of a dopamine hit for your reader, and they're like, "Oh, I want to know how this new ability works. I want to know where his new XP is. Oh, he killed a monster. I know he's going to get some great stuff now."
Mhm.
So that keeps people coming back.
Yeah, and I think it with the dopamine hits of those like keep coming. I think it's like a comfort factor. Like you said, people have been growing up watching anime, playing video games. I think that might be just a comfort thing that people are looking back on. Same with cozy fantasy. That's just plain old comfort.
Mhm.
And I think that that's why both of those genres have really picked up uh, quite a bit. So it's a great place to
Yeah,
be in right now, I think.
it is. I love cozy fantasy. I'm so glad that it's really picked up, but I think it probably wouldn't have picked up as much if without the pandemic and
Yeah,
then everything else that came after that.
yeah, yeah. I think everybody want. I know I personally picked up Legends and Lattes and was like, oh my gosh, I needed this cozy escape. So, and that's what books are always, a nice, fantasy books are always a nice little escape. Now you also run the Toronto Indie Author Con, which is coming up.
Yes, up in Canada. Yeah. Um it's as far as I know, the only Canadian indie author conference in Canada. And I basically put it together because I was a little annoyed by the fact that there wasn't anything like that for Canadians, and that there wasn't I I am very lucky, very privileged, as they would say, to be able to afford to go down to cons down in the States. Not everyone is. And so one of my goals was to try to go and to bring some of the people who I knew who could speak up, and bring some of the Canadians who I knew who should be speaking at these conferences, and give them a chance to speak to Canadians who couldn't afford it. So, you know, just setting up our own in Canadian conference to help out a little.
That's great. I'm gonna ask if anyone has any questions for Tao, pop them in the chat. We've got about a little less than 10 minutes left. So throw those questions in the chat if you have any. Now, what else do you have planned for this year?
Oh God. I've got the last book of the A Thousand League series releasing, and I believe July or August of this year. And then I have the first book of my new lit RPG, which I'm currently editing right now. Probably looking to release at the end of this year if I can get it right. And then book two by January of next year, I hope, if I get it right. And then, the and I gotta write the next Hidden Dishes series, book four, and I've got to do more research into that one. So, and figure out what other dishes I need have to add. But those are the major things that I've got going for this year, at least the ones that I can publicly announce now.
That's great. And I love that you personally do the cooking and testing out of the recipes. That's like the neatest thing. Uh,
It it's fun. It's interesting because not all of the recipes become part of my, the household rotation, because some of them take a lot more work than others, and I'm like, eh. But some of them do definitely do become part of, the things that we cook at home, or they get asked for constantly. And it's like, okay, we'll go do that.
that's great. And books, yeah, books have a way when you're reading a book, you want to smell the food, you want to eat the food. Like I find myself thinking about food that I've read about, like when I'm just not even reading. It's a very deep connection to write about. So that's great. So we do have a couple of questions here. Mezzi is asking, what's your favorite recipe that you've made that's and made an appearance in your books?
Ooh, I'll say the one that's new, probably, ish, I think it's in the latest book actually, which is the um garlic smashed potatoes. That was completely new for me. I was trying to look up some simple potato recipes, something that's, easy, small plates to for it, because it's thaumaturgic tapas. Um, and it's a very simple recipe where you get baby potatoes, you boil them until they're cooked, throw out the water, leave it running for a little while, just dry it out some more. Take the potatoes out, smash them down, uh, and then get garlic and butter, melt them inside your. Generally, I use the microwave. Sorry, Mo Ming doesn't do that because he's fancier than I am. But you can just melt them inside your microwave, and then you baste the whole thing with that, and then throw it into the oven. You get these really thin, crispy potatoes that are kind of chewy on the inside, that are just it's my son constantly asks for them. Um, and they're not too hard to do, so which is nice.
I know what I'm making now next time I buy potatoes because that sounds amazing.
Make sure to get the small baby potatoes. If you get them too big, they don't dry out a little bit well when you're putting them in a pot, to after you've thrown out the water, and then
Hmm.
it takes a lot longer inside the oven to cook out.
Hmm.
But
That sounds
otherwise, yeah,
amazing.
they're really tasty.
We have another recipe question. What is the biggest recipe mishap you've had? Have you had any?
Oh God. Book one, char kway teow. Um, that's a Malaysian dish, really nice. But the thing about char kway teow is, a lot of these hawker style, and actually generally Chinese food, it's all in the prep. If you prepare it properly, it's super fast to cook, right? But all the time it's in the prep time. With char kway teow, one of the things is that you have the rice noodles are really thin and flat, right? And you buy them, I buy them from the supermarkets, and then you take them and they're all stuck together. So you have to soak them inside the water to go and have them break up apart, but you can't leave them soaking too long. If you leave them soaking too long, they become too soft. And then when you take them out, they're soggy. They become this kind of complete soggy mess. And then because with char kway teow, you're trying to cook it at really high heats to get what they call wok, which is translated as the smell of wok, the wok heat, which doesn't make much sense, but you're basically trying to caramelize things at really high temperatures. So you generally have to heat your pan so that is piping hot, and when you throw oil in, you can see the smoke coming off the oil. If your noodles are a soggy mess and you throw it in there, a lot of oil splatters. B, it doesn't do that. It just becomes this kind of congealed mess, which isn't even that tasty to eat anymore. So yeah.
So you found that out from experience.
Oh yeah. Um, that's one of those recipes that's really fun to do, but it's one of those where the ingredients are simple. It looks simple, but it requires a lot of practice. Like
Mhm.
you can tell the difference between a good chef and a not good chef. Um, and even though they're cooking with the same ingredients, because it's all in the technique.
Mhm. Awesome. We have one other question from CA. And how many of your books do you have available on audio, Tao?
Everything, pretty
Yeah.
much. Um, I all of mine are narrated. I I've been incredibly lucky to be in that RPG, which is a audio heavy market. So, I mean, most people talk about between 40 to 60% of their income coming from audio.
Mhm.
So all of my work, everything from the Hidden Dishes series to A Thousand Lee to, all my shorts even, though those don't make me money, are in audio. I even when they don't necessarily translate directly to sale to income right now, I'm kind of committed to just putting everything into audio.
Mhm. That's great. We are almost at time, and I do love that about the audio because I've recently gotten into audio so much lately. It's a fantastic way to experience a book. Now, can you tell everyone where they can find you? And anything else you want to mention?
Well, you can find me on my website, mylifemytao.com. It basically gives you regular updates about everything that I am doing. I am also, if you want to buy my books, they are all my co-author books. Uh, they generally, if they're wide, they are on starletpublishing.com. And then otherwise, Amazon and everything else. These days, if you want to talk to me, I am most chatty on Blue Sky. I technically am on Threads, but I only see other authors on there, so I end up talking to them, mostly giving advice. Facebook, I technically have a page as an author as well. And if you like audiobooks, we actually have a bunch of our wide audiobooks on YouTube under our channel, Starlit Publishing. They're out there free. You have to listen to ads. That's how we get paid for it. But yeah, it's a good way to sample those.
That's great. Excellent. It was so great to chat with you, Tao. We've met a couple of times
Yes,
in Vegas and then at Dragon Con. You're gonna be at Dragon Con again this year, right?
I might not be.
Okay.
Um, I am looking at my travel plans for the year. Probably I'll figure things out in about May,
Mm-hmm.
and
Awesome.
then we'll see. Yeah,
Well, thank you
I
so
hope
much
to
for
win.
being our final event of Indie Fantasy Con, our first ever Indie Fantasy Con, and we got to be the last event. So thank you so much for coming, Tao.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope
Yeah,
you all had fun. I did.
yeah.
Thanks
It
again.
was-
Hopefully see you around.
We will.